To call Marvel's Ultimate Universe divisive would be an understatement. There was some good, and there was definitely some bad. Let's talk about the latter. I'm Adam Andrews with Top 10 Nerd, and this is the top 10 worst moments in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Number 10, Thor and Hella. Starting off with an example of why the Ultimate Universe does some unnecessary stuff from time to time, Thor was forced to kill his supervillain's son to save America from civil war. But what's funny, well not funny, is that wasn't even the unnecessary part. So it begins in the aftermath of an event called Ultimatum, which we will get to much later on. Basically, Ultimate Thor ends up sacrificing his own life to save his lover, Valkyrie. While in the afterlife, in order to be reunited with and save Valkyrie, the goddess Hella makes Thor fight a whole army of undead soldiers, which he does. But then Thor asks what else he needs to do, and this goddess just starts undressing herself and demanding that Thor gives her a baby. Which, of course he does, and it doesn't even save Valkyrie. This comes back later with the child, Modi Thor's son, being raised by a much more villainous Loki, feeling abandoned and seeking revenge, trying to turn America into a new Asgard while wielding an Infinity Stone and forcing Thor to eventually strike down his own evil son. Number 9. Look what they did to my boy! Almost everyone loves Deadpool. Weirdly, even some moms love Deadpool. So when the gritty, realistic, mature Ultimate Universe was going to bring the character in, you'd expect it to be a match made in heaven. No! I blame this version of the character for the monstrosity we got 3 years later in 2009's X-Men Origins Wolverine. The Ultimate Marvel version of Deadpool was a sergeant in the military named Wade Wilson. He's grim, he's angry, he's way too serious, and he also is an incredibly racist mutant hater. Oh, he was also a cyborg with incredible strength, he retained his signature healing factor, and instead of just being disfigured, he had no skin at all. And he's missing part of his skull, so his head is instead encased in a clear plastic case for everyone to see. Deadpool leads the Reavers, who are also racist, in trying to kill prominent mutants. Thankfully, Ultimate Deadpool was taken off the board by the 616 Deadpool in Deadpool Kills Deadpool in 2013. Number 8. Hank Pym needs to chill. Hank Pym has not really ever been that great of a dude. He has multiple untreated mental disorders and crazy insecurities that have caused him to do multiple not so great things in his time in the regular universe. But of course, everything in the Ultimate Universe gets ramped up a bit. Pym got involved in a very heated argument with his wife, Janet Van Dyne, over her friendship with Captain America. In Ultimates issue number 6, things start to get physical until the Wasp shrinks down to her smaller size to get away from her husband. Unfortunately, the terribly insecure Hank cornered her and sprayed her wasp-sized self with bug spray. She hid under a desk to catch her breath after inhaling the toxic fumes, while her husband just kept on with the emotional bombardment. But he didn't stop there. He then sent an army of ants after her until he realized what he was doing to his own wife. This stuff kind of boils my blood just a little bit. The fight resulted in Janet's very near death, her hospitalization, and his expulsion from the Ultimates. Number 7. Making the Maker. The Fantastic Four in the Ultimate Universe remained relatively the same, at least in their family dynamics. Their backstory was slightly modified, but overall the four main heroes lived as you'd expect, until it all went Marvel Ultimate-y. First off, Sue Storm and Reed Richards lost a child together, but then Reed Richards proposed to Susan Storm and she rejected his proposal. Just like that, the Fantastic Four was no more, but that's not the end. What came next, really quickly I might add, was Reed going absolutely bonkers, faking his death, de-lifing his family, planning alien terror plots around the world, being trapped in the negative zone where he primed his intellect by stretching his brain and skull, and he built an army. Since he was horribly burnt by the Human Torch, Reed took to wearing a helmet and founded the Children of Tomorrow, the Dark Ultimates, and he called himself the Maker. He became an incredibly evil Reed Richards. Number 6. Cap hates France? Look, despite the name, Captain America, Steve Rogers, is very much a protector of the world, not just America. So it was really odd when in Ultimates number 12 from Mark Miller, Brian Hitch, and Paul Neary, we see the Ultimate Marvel Universe Captain America verbally wailing on France, of all places. Captain America is caught in a fight with Herr Kleiser, an old German rival. Just for better context, Nick Fury is there too. Captain America is obviously the hero though, so eventually he gets the upper hand. It was just so odd that when Kleiser was pinned by Cap and asking for surrender, well, Cap digs his shield into the dude's stomach and says, "Surrender? Surrender? You think this letter on my head stands for France? The comment was kind of fueled by the time period it was written in, as the states were entering into a war and France refused to join them, leading to some anti-France feelings in the real world. But this World War II era dig at the country left a bad taste in pretty much everyone's mouth, especially from a character that is supposed to be much better than that. Number 5. Wolverine. Why are you so weird? Look, I'm gonna get into all the weirdness that is the Ultimate Universe Wolverine in a sec, but one thing that kind of immediately sticks out is how this version of Wolverine seems to repeatedly swing for ladies that are a little below his age bracket, or like a lot below, and always redheads, which I guess kind of checks out from the 616 version too. Jean Grey, Firestar, and the one we're talking about today, Mary Jane Watson. In Ultimate Spider-Man number 66, Wolverine and Peter Parker end up switching bodies after Wolverine makes some unwanted advances on the teenage Jean Grey, who psychically swapped their bodies. I don't know why she did that, but she did it. Wolverine finds some drawbacks, but apparently they pale in comparison to the perk that is the teenage Peter's girlfriend, Mary Jane. Wolverine tells MJ that he, in Peter's body, doesn't need to go to school, while also making some crude advances towards her as well. It comes off as kinda creepy and really cringy. Number 4. Wolverine How You Die. Now, on the topic of Wolverine, he himself has quite a few moments that make him kinda awesome and some that make him kinda horrible. Ultimate Wolverine is no longer feral, and he does not have the classic healing factor. Instead, he gets the survival factor, which is kind of a heck of a lot better. He can survive a heck of a lot, almost anything. S.H.I.E.L.D. chopped his body off, leaving only his head, and he breathed through his skin. They put his head in a vacuum and he went into stasis. Hulk ripped his body and threw it into another mountain range, and when Wolverine found that half, it was still fresh, no organ failure, no rot, and the blood was somehow still pumping. And he just put himself back together again with no issues. Ultimate Wolverine is unkillable by any means, no matter what you do. It was also implied that Ultimate Wolverine was the precursor of all mutants. He was sort of the first mutant in the world. So all the other mutants are basically products of Weapon X experimentation on Wolverine. On top of that, his blood could be synthesized into a substance that gives mutants insane power boosts. Marvel made Ultimate Wolverine insanely overpowered, and then they absolutely killed him in the stupidest way possible. He died because Magneto did a hand wave thingamajig, as someone on Reddit said, and apparently he destroyed every single one of Wolverine's cells while ripping out his adamantium. Number 3. Is this Game of Thrones? If you haven't noticed by some of the previous points, Marvel did a lot of unnecessary sexualizing of the Ultimate Universe. And to just push it a bit further into unnecessary odd choices made by Marvel for this universe, they included the incestuous relationship between the characters of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Somehow it actually feels worse than the one in Game of Thrones, maybe just because it was extremely shocking and the two characters never had anything even similar to this in the 616 continuity. Fans wondered whether it was really necessary for Mark Millar to pair the two characters together and questioned whether the twist added anything new to the story at all. Answer: it didn't. Probably the biggest issue with this revelation is that now the characters can't so much as look at each other without fans accusing the writers of returning to the incest plot from the Ultimate X-Men. Number 2. Blob. After the events of that Ultimatum thing, which I'm so close to talking about, many heroes were taken out and or unaccounted for. One such hero would be Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp. Now, as we know, Hank Pym, Ant-Man, was kind of the worst. And though a terrible husband, he still diligently looked for his missing wife. What he found instead was the villain the Blob feasting on her remains. It's probably one of the most striking images from the whole Ultimate Universe, but it just gets stranger and somehow worse. Enraged at the sight of it, Ant-Man converted to his giant man state and picked up the Blob in his giant hand and bit Blob's head clean off and spat it on the ground to the shock and horror of his teammates. And in at number 1 is Ultimatum. Ultimatum was supposed to be how the writers finished off the Ultimate Universe stories. Obviously it didn't turn out that way, but as you can tell from previous points, writers kinda just went a little haywire with things they would do with a dying universe story. Basically, Magneto, who has been a pretty brutal villain in this universe so far, goes even farther during the mega event where stakes were way high. Basically, after Magneto gains control of the Hammer of Thor and is manipulated by none other than Dr. Doom, he messes with the magnetic pillars of the world, flipping them on their head and sending weather into a frenzy. The big event was a giant tsunami called the Ultimatum Wave that basically put New York underwater and brought a giant casualty list along with it. Bruce Banner drowns but the Hulk lives, the Wasp gets eaten, as mentioned before, and Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are killed off. In a bit more of a divisive move, while the X-Men are looking for their fallen teammates in the wake of the tidal wave in New York, Magneto pays a visit to Professor X and in a pretty brutal scene, snaps the professor's neck. Magneto also rips the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton and pretty much disintegrates him like we talked about before. Alright everybody, on that cheerful note, that's the end of the list. I know there have been worse moments and some that I missed, so leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe here at Top 10 Nerd. I've been your host Adam Andrews. You can find my socials in the description, and until next time, peace out nerds!